campuses all over the country. Some of the most notable ones are Boulder, Amherst, Madison, Baton Rouge, Miami, and Minnesota, who have had some pretty substantial actions. And it's important to realize with the CIA work that we've done in the past year that we've contributed to an atmosphere in this country where people actually are beginning to distrust the CIA. And, you know, along with these congregate hearings and all the news that's coming out about it, our work is extremely important right now. And I think one of the major gains that we can compliment ourselves for is that people are actually starting to look at the CIA as not just good guys anymore out there collecting information for our national security, but they're actually participating in waging terrorist wars around the world. CIA works a pretty good complement to divestment in the sense that it, like divestment, raises the issues of universal complicity in allowing the CIA to continue to recruit on campus. And it's also connected to third world issues and connected to international foreign policy and the United States foreign policy. So it's a good thing, you know, to continue on this kind of work in the same sense as divestment. It has a lot of the same potential of mobilizing people and raising consciousness about these issues. Basically, I'm going to try to keep this really brief. There's a couple of places that we can go with the CIA here, and hopefully within the context of these discussions, we'll come up with some ideas for where we can go as a network with CIA work. One of the things we can think about is how to further exploit the congregate crisis, how to fill in the gaps of information that is not being brought up in these hearings, how to make sure that people are getting educated as to what the CIA's role is, particularly in regards to Central America. Central America, at least in Minnesota, has always been a rallying point for why we are protesting the CIA, focusing a lot on the Contra War in Nicaragua and also on the United States destabilization and the whole history of the CIA in regards to Latin America and Central America. A lot of information is coming out, for instance, from the CRISPIC Institute, which has published information that has the ability of filling in the gaps in congregated hearings. The information about drug trafficking, about the role of the CIA, about connections with mercenaries all over the world. I think today one of the things that we should devote ourselves to is solving the question, where do we go from here with the CIA campaign? A lot of campuses have sort of reached a crescendo at this point. Amherst is one of them. Unfortunately, Amherst is not here today, it's unfortunate, but University of Minnesota, for example, one of the major things that we've confronted throughout the process of trying to keep the CIA off campus, actually trying to prevent them from recruiting, is we have brought upon ourselves, some pretty serious legal charges. Amherst has raised thousands of dollars for their trial, which was incredibly successful. They actually were successful in putting the CIA on trial using a necessity defense to try to, and they were very successful. The court decided that the CIA was the guilty party in this case, but it cost them an awful lot of money. This is something that can be used as a political tool. But in thinking about what it actually entails, all this kind of work, some campuses are looking and saying, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? So I think that's one of the questions that we can think about answering right now. And a couple places where we can go, two ideas people can discuss is for people who are concerned about legal charges against students, who are concerned about possible disciplinary action against students, and disciplinary action which is already occurring as a result of CIA or any other kind of demonstrations. University of Minnesota is considering becoming a clearinghouse of information of student repression against students for participating in demonstrations and direct action. If you want to know more information about that, there's a bunch of folders over here. You can talk to Mike. We are going to try to collect information as to how disciplinary action is being used against students in the form of expulsions and suspensions for taking part in demonstrations. Particularly in regards to the CIA, this is going to become very important in the next years. Another thing we can talk about is this proposed tour of CIA agents, former CIA agents, who have left the agency in protest because of their actions around the world. So this is an idea that
or say 2 note takers who can get together and make cohesive, neat, copious notes? Any? Okay, so we got Randy and Dan. Okay, so we got 2. Oh, okay, well that sounds good. Okay, so moving on to gender issues, we've got Jackie from Madison.
There's no denying that PSN has a strong background in fighting for gender issues, whether it be reproductive rights and the annual Roe versus Wade celebration, whether it be fighting for our rights as gays and lesbians in student communities, or targeting bogus abortion clinics on our campuses, or sexual harassment campaigns like Madison is going through right now. This brings us to where we are right now. I have several concerns to express to you that I'd like to send you to our discussion groups, namely internal gender dynamics in the PSN. First of all, is affirmative action being taken in our steering committee? Is the current policy being successful? Current policy is that up to each campus to send a fair contingent to the steering committee as far as men and women. Is that being effective? Secondly, is there an opportunity for women to take leadership roles in the national PSN? Is that happening? Thirdly, group dynamics. Are women being given the opportunity to take facilitative and communicative roles within PSN? This, of course, stems from our own individual PSN groups, and we should look at those areas as well. This poses the question that I'd like you to take to discussion groups when we go to Group A. Is a feminist agenda being addressed in the national PSN? What does that mean? It means that there is a commitment by the national to work on gender issues. That commitment means that a reasonable number of our campuses are taking up gender issues campaigns and are networking and showing the leadership and initiative in the national PSN. So again, the question is a feminist agenda being addressed in the national PSN? Toward that end, we'll be putting forth a proposal in the form of a call to women organizers that follows an idea for a national meeting for women students was proposed at the National Mobilization Student Meeting in Washington, D.C. on April 25th. A small amount of discussion has been going on since that meeting. It's been suggested that the women's meeting take place in Washington, D.C. around the October 11th rally for gay and lesbian rights. And some goals and objectives suggested for this meeting are as follows. First of all, to give women a sense of unity and empowerment. Second of all, to help women gain organizational skills. Thirdly, to make steps toward integrating a feminist agenda into student politics. Fourthly, to network students on a national level. All that we've come up with henceforth is tentative because we want a broader range of women to be taking part in the decision-making process in schools. We want this meeting to address a large percentage of women with respect to class and race. We are issuing this call to all interested women who want to help organize this meeting in the fall so that we can all work toward unity and strength in the movement. I'd like you to consider this call to women organizers and consider the question, is a feminist agenda being addressed in the national PSN? And I'd like all of us to discuss this in Group A and come back with some feedback.
Okay, now we've got an update on racism, anti-racism work from, I'm not sure if it's Jim or John? Jim from Florida.
Hi, I'm Jim from Miami. Well, every time we get together, the topic of racism comes up. And to me, this is one of the two most important issues we face in the movement of the 80s and 90s. It's racism and sexism. And I think that one way or another, all other issues that we work on can be related to this, especially in the area of foreign policy. Until we clean up our racist act at home, we can't hope to have our foreign policy be a fair and equitable policy. I see that we as students when we get together to talk about racism, we often get bogged down wondering, is it right for us to help minorities? Can they handle racism themselves? Are we stepping on their toes or whatnot? And I think this argument completely breaks down in that supposes that it's a minority or a black problem, racism, and it's not. It's all our problems, and we need to deal with it as much as everybody else. And we don't have to become beat ourselves to death wondering, are we going to hurt somebody or trample on somebody's good work? I mean, how do we move forward, and do this work? Of course, we really have to be sensitive not to step on the good work of minority groups, and not to want to move in and dominate the work that minority people are doing. And I think we can easily enough accomplish that by just centering on work that we can do and work within our own community, as we are by and large a predominantly white organization here. I mean, there's plenty of work we can do within the white community. I mean, we can make white people aware. I mean, it's questionable to many white people today whether we even have racism in America. And B, we can work to make our institutions more accessible to minorities. It seems that white people have really gone out of their way to make institutions inaccessible for minorities. So in this planning group that's coming up, I mean, I think we really need to discuss concrete issues on how we can move ahead and do meaningful work on the question of racism. I mean, like, where should we channel our energies? Where best should we channel our energies? It's such an enormous problem, such an enormous scope of problems. What should we do? What should we do best? What would we be best concentrating on? And what out of these things that we're going to strive for? What can we realistically achieve? And how can we go about it? And I think a very important question for us to address specifically this time is do we have adequate representation for the minority members within our own group? Does the PSN have a mechanism for dealing with the membership of minorities within its group? Not dealing with, of course, but for representing and being aware of what they need and what they want out of this group. And I would just really like to stress that when we get in our group that we all keep a firm eye on organizing it, doing real work, and not become bogged down with ideological issues and things that we could talk about for days and days and days and never really get too far.
Okay, our last update from different work areas is Helen from Chicago talking about Jackson work.
Okay. I just want to introduce people basically to the beginning stages of the Jackson is now in its exploratory stage. And some of us, like Chris here, they also have been working on the Chicago exploratory, setting up a youth committee for the Jackson campaign that would address itself particularly to student and youth issues in the campaign, really help develop his platform on issues that we as students are concerned about, and then really work out ways to, to build his campaign for college students next year. As many of you might know, Jackson is running first in many of the polls, although a lot of media want to that's the case. And he's actually polling first among college students. And I think if you look at his positions, in relationship to any other one of the politicians, that is running, stance on issues that we're most concerned about, from educational access to Central America, anti-CIA, to apartheid of South Africa. He has very consistently, supported and actually been a part of initiating many of the movements that we ourselves are also participating in. I think what we've been discussing in our committee that we're starting to from Chicago is that the Jackson campaign is going to be a multinational campaign. It's going to involve Black, white, Asian, Latino students on every campus that has been set up. We're going to be encouraging every campus to set up Jackson committees, coalitions that do represent, a full rainbow. We really want to make use of this campaign to actually help develop a more inclusive movement in the Midwest than exists right now. And I think that that's doable. The Jackson campaign, is really behind that. And I think there's also right now a lot of flexibility and openness for us to help develop this position on the questions that we're concerned about and actually take out our views to the city movement. Chris has recently been working on drafting a position paper that's probably going to be included in the informational packet that will be distributed throughout the Midwest and possibly on a broader scale, where he, has gone down, what it is about Jackson that, really is attractive and appealing to students. And I think there are a lot of ways and opportunities for us in this campaign to further project the issues that we are going to talk about here in the next few days. So, I know there's going to be further discussion about here, how the PSN, how does the PSN members work today. So, we're here, to answer questions, opportunities.
Okay, now we've got Linda here from California from the Asian Pacific Student Union to talk.
Actually, we'd like to pass this thing out. I sent it around yesterday, which was sort of an outreach tool that our outreach brochure we use for the March in Sacramento. We'd like to pass this out. I just happen to have a few materials on me, so I'll just put that on the table so you can check out some of the literature that went out actually before the March, and then just some general coverage. Maybe if I should do a little intro. I'm from Berkeley campus. I'm active in the Asian Student Union on campus, which is part of the statewide Asian Pacific Islander Student Union, which was one of the networks actually called for the March, along with two other student networks. Just to let people know a little bit about the networks, I know these brothers here are from Mesa at Villa Costa, California. Maybe we should check them out too. But the networks are made of the different nationality organizations on the different campuses and the different systems, like the UC, the University of California system, the state colleges, community colleges, high schools. So that's sort of what we're about, the networks. And I guess the presentation today is kind of talking about the March in Sacramento that happened last April. And I think since PSN, some of the campuses in PSN are working in education. I think I think the California networks probably share some of the lessons that we learned through the March this spring. So as people probably heard, the March in Sacramento was called by 3 California student networks. The APSA, that's the African Black Statewide Student Alliance, the OPSI, the Asian Pacific Student Union, and MECHA, the Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, also California Chicano Student Network. And the march brought together over 7,000 people to our state capitol. Students, community members, legislators, union members, parents, K-12 students, different nationalities from, the southern end of California to the northern end, and actually brought them together, to our state capitol to put our governor, Duke Majid, which we call the Duke, on notice that we, people of California, feel that his priorities, bombs over books and the rich over poor, is really fucked up. And that we think that educating our youth and our communities and incorporating a true history of all people in this country must be a priority for this country today. And that education is a democratic right for all people, and it can no longer be just for a privileged elite. So, on April 6th, we made history in a similar way that third world students in 1968 and 69 who not only strove against the war abroad, but who also looked critically at this country, the conditions in our communities. And, people really got pissed off and decided that, hey, we need to take the initiative. We're going to wage the campaign here at home. And that led to one of the most militant and third world student strikes in history. And that this spring, that we took that same challenge to say that we want to set a new direction for our state. Because just like as people have probably learned from the divestment struggle and over the past years, like internationally, we're seeing now, Korea, Philippines, in Latin America, that students can have an impact and change the course of this country. And so going into the march, we had an educational agenda and a vision for our future that led to one of the biggest demonstrations on our state capitol that has not been seen since the anti-Vietnam War protests. And I just want to tell people that the impact was pretty tremendous, and I know some of the things that I brought probably are not able to cover all, the different kind of impacts we had. But what we were able to accomplish was that we were able to put education on the top of the agenda, not only for many legislators who are now putting out all kinds of bills around education, bilingual education, state funding, but also I think we got to put enough pressure on him, on the Duke, our governor, that he now has to publicly address and acknowledge that education is an issue and it's important to the residents of California. But that isn't all that the march accomplished. That we were able to bring thousands of students and community people together, and that we were able, and we know, and that we know that the administrations now know that we are a force to be reckoned with. Because we are clearly now a political force, and we know that this is just the beginning. But I think what we all could probably agree on is that building a movement is not easy. That there's financial constraints and little piddly laws and all kinds of things that will always be there and always try to limit us. Y'all know this, right? But I think the one thing that we can have control over, and that I think what we learned from the march work this spring, is that what really pulled the march together and what made it a success was the third world and multinational unity that was built through the march work. And so the question, how is this done? Well, because the march actually called by 3 networks, each network was able to bring in and represent the sentiments of each of those respective groups of people. And in California, as people could probably get a sense of, the student movement is comprised not only of campuses with a broad range of student government types, radicals, environmentalists, union workers, etc., but that important part of the student movement is the nationality organizations that are able to encompass the experiences of people of color in this country, and that these forums are our vehicles to express our right to determine what we feel is best for us, given each of our different experiences and conditions, because they are different. So, and obviously this doesn't mean that we can't work together. The march proved that, but that the 3 networks were able to work also with CAPSA, which is the California Progressive Student Alliance, which is a white student network, similar to PSN, and that our networks were able to work together with CAPSA because we have good relations with CAPSA. They had a speaker and were able to mobilize people to the march. And I think we also recognize that they are in existence and they're beginning to develop that network in California, which I feel is very positive, and I know a lot of third world activists also feel that's a positive development in California. That I think through the march work, it confirms to us and many activists that part of being able to build a strong statewide, and hopefully someday a national student movement will mean that like the march work, we'll have to have a principled relationship that actually respects the differences among us and be able to unite on what we can and understand that that's what a vibrant student movement is about, And so I just want to end with a thought that in these next few years, it's actually a pretty exciting period for students and for the nation, because just as we were able to see the march and setting a new tone for our lawmakers and for the people of California, that together we here And I mean, your network, our networks, we can do the same for the station, you know, that, because as we enter this post-Reagan era, you know, with his decline, you know, Iran-Contra stuff, you know, that our generation, we're here, we're going to inherit this future, you know, and that, so we have to put forward our vision and a progressive agenda that respects and reflects all people, and that takes a socially responsible stand and puts forward an alternative to this right-word, conservative, individualistic, fucked up shit that Reagan's been putting out, you know? And so I just hope that today that we're, you know, like I hope I get to meet a lot of people, and actually go to talk to people and actually share those kinds of lessons, and that hopefully together, you know, the lessons that come out of here, that we're able to, like maybe myself and these brothers here, be able to take back to California and share with activists there.
I think we're like these conference now after hearing Linda talk. Our last thing in this sort of overall session is a discussion about, a presentation about where PSN is at now. So, Bruce, Karen?
Should we get together, or what do you want to do?
Also, it's 11 o'clock now, and so we're already behind schedule. So I guess after this, it's after possible, we'll move into Group A.
This is a little bit about where we're at, but where we've been too. Try to keep this short. We just got a number of points. We're going to bounce back and forth, and people can talk a little bit. For the ultra-condensed history, Progressive Student Network formed 1980. The new era. The Reagan reign called for a certain amount of response on the part of the students. It was the founding conference held in Ohio, attracted 450 activists, really anxious to find a way to bring together people who had particular areas of interest, quote-unquote single issue or concentrated groups, to get together and begin to share that experience. Part of the thinking on people involved in that was to help overcome the phenomena within the student movement of the rise and fall. We've seen a number of crests, rising interest, and a reclining of it. And hopefully the goal was to construct something that would allow the overall movement and the accumulated experience and knowledge ride through the down periods, as it were, and to allow us to be that much farther ahead in a position to seize an upsurge in student activity and student interest. In general, we found that in the years since, our fortunes have risen and fallen with the broader political climate within the country. Reagan got a lot of people in motion. A couple years into that, the struggle, there was, we could say, a lower level of activity. But then the other thing we found is that we can also change the conditions we're working in. That through hard work, we can make the soil that much fertile for the kind of work that we're interested in doing. So in that time, we've gone through a number of different structural changes, a number of different concentrations. In the initial conference, there was fairly broad geographical representation, with the Rockies being the historical divider. Well, one thing we've seen in the last 5 years within the PSN organization is a shift in the concentration. At one point, East Coast really formed a bedrock. A lot of the solid schools were key to the maintenance of the organization. And as we've seen over time, there's been a shift as far as the organization is concerned, a real, quite obvious Midwest-centric kind of organization. But I think that that's continued to form a very good bedrock. And in the current period, we've seen a lot of growth in the old scenario of the ability of the Midwest base to continue to reach out. We've had some real gains in terms of establishing contacts in the South where we haven't seen before. The fresh faces from the West Coast provide us new perspective and important lessons included in that. And we're really going to have to return our attention to the East Coast as far as establishing formal relations, formal expansion of PSN into the East. Hopefully we can talk a little more about that over time.
I'm going to address the composition of the network, in that it too has changed over time. This founding conference was called by anti-draft registration and anti-nuclear power groups. And that single issue, I believe, I wasn't there. And it started out as single issue groups coming together and networking. Since that time, it's evolved into our present composition, which is where most of the active affiliates within the network are multi-issue groups that have strong local campus organizations. And that although the PSN program and our strategy and view of the student movement leaves room within that for incorporating single-issue student groups, that the groups that have found the most utility in networking, the groups that have found participation in the network most beneficial to them, have been multi-issue groups, and that can even tend to reinforce itself unless we consciously address how we go back to reincorporate single-issue groups, to reincorporate groups that have primarily a feminist political agenda, to incorporate groups that aren't part of our composition right now. One of the benefits we get from having multi-issue groups is a certain longevity and a certain coherence of a political outlook. People stick with a group over a longer period of time, and it develops leadership within the PSN where people stay and come to PSN meetings over a period of time and look to building a multi-issue student movement. Some real quick breakdowns on past student movement, on past PSN meetings. In terms of about 55% of people attending have been men and 45% have been women. About 15% have been national minorities. Anywhere from around 5 to 15% have attended gay lesbian caucuses. And that's kind of just a quick breakdown of factors of past meetings. And this one's probably roughly the same.
Good. We're clipping good. We wanted a good pace here. We're going to talk a little bit about different structures of functioning that have been utilized throughout the history. There's been different attempts to try to figure out not only what we are, but how we want to get it done and how we want to carry ourselves on. Guiding principles have been trying to establish an equal role for the various campuses, but then also recognize the various levels of strength are one of the rules that governs our areas of work, which is uneven development. You'll find that some campuses are very strong at a particular point and others are having. For a couple of years, there was a national office, the Progressive Student Network in Washington, D.C. It was staffed by students who happened to be on one of the local campuses. There was formal procedure of elections, but it kind of fell on de facto. Well, if you live in the area, perhaps you can contribute to the national office. National tasks were left up to a handful of individuals, whereas they provided an important function as far as a national identity and also a focus for work. It wasn't able to support itself, or wasn't really a viable functioning structure in that it wasn't inclusive and required on the Herculean efforts of a few individuals who went through a classic accelerated burnout process. Different types of interactions have been utilized at different points. Regional meetings, an attempt to just bring people together on a regular basis in their areas to try to just make policy through a very broad, popular, participatory thing. And then for quite a bit of the period of the network, we've kind of functioned in a catch-as-catch-can situation where responsible individuals have taken upon themselves to make sure things have been done. People who always did it continue to do it. And that kind of situation over time developed a thing where people who were on, whatever the inside decision-making roles just stayed there. People on the outside perceived this and remained there. And it wasn't necessarily a very healthy thing, but in the absence of a formal structure, a formal mechanism, we see these informal methods of practice emerge. So that's why it's very significant that 1 year ago at this national membership meeting, a formal structure for the network was adopted, taking primarily note for the steering body that emerged out of that. And the key points about the new steering body structure, with each campus having representatives functioning on the guiding, decision-making, executing bodies, and also with the auxiliary membership role that's played within this meeting, is that just the participatory nature of it. The ability of individual campuses to take the responsibility for the functioning of the network. No longer can we just say, well, who's responsible, who's doing it? We have to end up looking at ourselves and saying, we now have that responsibility. The main benefits of having established structure, a formalized structure that ensures participation, is that it helps promote, train, and develop new leadership within the thing. It's not just, oh, the same people call up the same people again, but again, new people emerge and take on the responsibilities of making the thing work. It's just a healthier practice. Formal structures and procedures help eliminate old ones that need to be replaced. But again, it's dependent, the functioning and the success of the new steering structure is dependent upon the local groups playing their part, carrying the load. And again, we have to look to ourselves to say, how do we move the thing forward? Again, the other key benefit of a formalized structure and body within our thing is it provides a basis for interacting and establishing relationships with other groups and other organizations. Through decision-making meetings like this one here and the steering bodies, and through that interaction we can begin to focus our energies as a network, begin to more concretely share those experiences and benefit for those, and ultimately lay the basis for the growth of the network.
I guess that's really what we need. The final thing we want to address is how do we continue to move forward? What's the road forward? One question within that is what is the political focus of our work? And I don't mean that in the way of, this is the only thing we work on, or this defines us as an organization. But the network, even as loose as it is, has had focuses, and the student movement has had areas of work that have contributed to its building of the student movement in terms of adding campuses, and it's had work which has contributed to a longer-term building of the movement. 2 years ago was the upsurge around apartheid, and that was clearly the political focus then. They were the largest demonstration since the bombing of Cambodia in 1972. And the network was in place at that time, and since, as a result of that, and in that process, has really grown tremendously in the past couple of years. That focus has shifted from apartheid for many campuses to this spring, where we've seen a lot of activity around anti-CIA organizing in Central America as a main focus of work, an upsurge against domestic racism. The ones that got the most national press weren't necessarily campuses that the PSN works with, but that had an impact upon our efforts, and it had an impact upon the entire student movement. Then you also, you can go to things like the March for Educational Rights in California. So that this spring has seen really a broad range of activity that's grown off of that upsurge in '85. I think it's really, to me, I've only been involved in the PSN since the October of '85, which is kind of the best time to jump aboard, because what everybody tells me is that things have really grown since then, adding campuses, adding political development. What exists is some sort of, what I guess I'm going to call some sort of a contradiction between what is the hot issue of the moment and what is the task you need to undertake to come up to a more long-term strategy of how we build a student movement that fits into an overall movement in this country that will really achieve some fundamental progressive change. One thing that's hot now, and I think it's something we really need to address at this conference and how we move it forward, is the anti-CIA organizing work. It's one of the things that's had the most national focus and a national projection in the press. It builds on some of the past strengths of the anti-apartheid movement, as it was addressed earlier. And I think we really need, that needs to be looked at, and how the PSN relates to that, to both build that work and how we continue to build ourselves off of that. What political development needs to go around that, what issues we want to raise, and what organizational developments need to occur in relation to that. The second part of this, though, is a longer-term strategy for building a strong student movement, one that's capable of having a real effect. And that's really focusing on the question of how do we build a multinational student movement. I think Linda addressed a lot of those questions earlier, but where we're fighting campus racism doesn't appear to be the hot issue of the moment on our campuses, or where it takes more struggle and more work to build the coalitions and to build the political unity to fight against it. That needs to be undertaken at the same time that these hot issues are being organized around that will contribute to the building of the network. And that's really something we need to address as we do all of our work, because of the crucial nature of it in terms of building over the long term and incorporating that into our work. So those are some things to think about in terms of defining a political focus for how we go forward.
So coupled with the questions of focus that we just touched on there. There's also a question of where do we actually look, or physically where kind of do we look. I just have like 3 very generalized strategies for next steps as far as expansion and growth of the network. I'll just lay them out. Number 1 is just to consolidate where we are strong. One point years ago at the meeting, someone said the best way to build coalitions is to build your own organization. There's a certain amount of logic to that, and we have to be sure that we maintain meeting the needs of the groups who are involved, and to make sure that the areas where we are strong, we maintain a high level of functioning and involvement of the different people to service the needs of the existing group. The second thing would be to stand as a pole or a magnet to attract individual campus organizations that develop out of the conditions on their own campuses. People who've gone through this history know it's a lonely feeling to be an isolated campus group looking for someone else to interact with and begin to share experiences. It's a very happy history to the extent that the PSN has been able to play that role for campuses who have begun to develop things on their own campus, look around, and they find the PSN as a very viable and very helpful organization in which to be and build ties with other organizations. So we continue to be out there, to be visible, to pick up a campus at a time, to pick up and to establish new areas of involvement. And then I'd say the third main step takes on establishing formal ties and relationship with existing regional and issue-based networks. Again, we can proceed campus by campus, but throughout the nation, there's a number of networks all the way from 3 schools to 15 that have begun to discuss with each other, coming together by geographical coincidence, coming together around issue. We know, for example, in the Amherst area, we speak of this Amherst school, but in fact, the CIA and Trial Project is a 7-school operation that has brought together a whole number of students. So we can look to establishing organization-to-organization ties with them, begin to work on joint work and program that will then establish a growth for the overall student movement. So those are just like the 3 ways we can look to procedurally begin to deal with other students, other groups, and to look to expand the PSN and the broader student movement. I think that's pretty much the points we wanted to cover, and any other stuff we'll get to later.
Okay, to just reiterate very briefly, now we're going to go into the first session of groups. We're going to talk about sort of larger political issues and how like the PSN fits in these things. Like how do we fit into building, multinational unity? How do we fit into that struggle? And what's our role? All that stuff. I'm just going to go through again the people who are going to facilitate these 4 different groups that are all talking about the same thing. So I think we've got Amy. Where's Amy? Okay, well, she's going to be right here. So Amy's going to be right here. And Joe, where's Joe? Why don't you stand up? I can see you. Joe is going to be the back end of the room. And we've got Bob over there. He's going to be downstairs. And Karen, the back there, is going to be downstairs also. But we didn't have a plan as to how to break people up. But so people... Okay, we want to make sure, that different campuses... I don't think we really have to... numbers, but just to make sure that different campuses are separate, so that it's not all Illinois here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you go really quickly, just once again, exactly which issues each of these people is
Okay. Each of these groups, the morning thing, like I said, talking about like these larger political issues, each group is talking about the same thing. We just wanted it to be smaller so that everybody can participate. So each group is talking about the same thing, coming up with different proposals, trying to, try to reach community on different political issues. And that's those 2 groups.
One thing that got sent out of Iowa City, which there's a number of copies floating around of this, suggestions for questions in these areas. I guess the reaction from some people is that these are questions that we can at least start as a focus with in these groups. So everyone, I guess all the facilitators should at least have a copy. And do you have more copies of this, Joe? Because Joe might have more copies if people want them. It's a bunch of questions to start out in these areas.
Okay, does anybody? Okay, we got a couple of Eric?
I think procedurally, we could say, let's form 4 equal groups on our own, we'll waste a lot of time. I think we should just either cut up the room, or I'm not trying to be
Okay, well, I mean,
grade school or nothing, but we'll spend 15 minutes, we need a few more there. Stick some kind of halfway, half room, something, you know?
okay, so, or how about people who are sort of in this general area will stay here, we want about 15 people. Let's have like this side here, go downstairs, have like half of the back, go further back, the other half of the back, go downstairs.
So 15 is a goal
Yeah.
number, though?
Well, we're talking 15 points. Oh, we have a couple of announcements before we break up.
Oh,
Pete?
I'd like to make an announcement before people break up. The reason I'm from the Student Coalition Against Apartheid Racism in Gainesville, Florida, and the reason we brought 300 t-shirts wasn't because we thought people would sell 300 t-shirts. We bought them because we sell them for 5 and 6 individually, but we also, to help other groups, sell them in quantity for $2.75, basically the cost of production. And we take checks, even bad checks, as long as you get back and get the money in the bank. So, I don't want to have to deal with this the entire time. So if you're interested in looking at t-shirts and getting quantity, you can fundraising for your own groups. I'll deal with this today and hopefully close it up later.
Yeah, one of the things that I forgot to mention in my opening thing is that I'm not going to give you the gory details of this, but the University of Minnesota is attempting to expel 2 members of PSO and eliminate us as an organization. This is like university repression, big time. Mike is one of the people that they are threatening with expulsion right now. We're asking for people here to write letters of protest against this act by our administration. There's information regarding the charges here. There's like the addresses to send them to. The people can just write letters and send them from your home so that they have that postmark on them. You'll just talk to Mike right here or talk to me or anybody else from Minnesota. Sometime during the course of this weekend, we would like everybody to write a letter.
We're also trying to serve as an advocate clearinghouse for information on student conduct, no charge, just activists, so we can kind of get an advocate sense of where it's at. We've got some
where possible rallies. 2, that PSN reaffirms its commitment to wage against male chauvinism internally as well as in the broader political struggles, and urges educational workshops and conscious raising around sexism. PSN also strongly urges to 1, have space in the newsletter for gender issues. 2, stick to the affirmative action principle of the steering committee representatives. And most importantly, to wage local campaigns on gender-related issues. 3, PSN encourages local campuses to organize around gender issues and network nationally around these issues. Some suggestions to campaigns are 1, gay and lesbian rights, 2, reproductive rights, Roe versus Wade celebration, 3, birth control, 4, AIDS and safe sex, 5, sexual victimization, and 6, student mother issues. And lastly, the PSN endorses and supports the national meeting for women students that will be taking place next fall.
Okay, moving on, racism.
We came up with this kind of position with strong suggestions, I guess is how you define it. It is in 3 parts. Basically what we have is a paragraph recognition of racism, then we have the principles of PSN and dealing with it, and then it's kind of 3 suggestions. So I'll just go through
general membership meeting of the PSN, June 1987, urges Jesse Jackson to run for president and encourage members so disposed to work actively on his campaign. That's 1. 2. PSN select one person to act as contact with the National Rainbow Youth Coordinator for input and updates of national efforts. 3. The PSN makes a commitment to advance the electoral discussion through the PSN News, as well as sum up our practice in the work reports collected from Madison. And the last one, Chris.
We urge all Jesse Jackson supporters to take advantage of the unique opportunity his candidacy offers by 1. Working to create Students for Jackson chapters on our campuses, which unites various organizations and activists reflecting the Rainbow Coalition, i.e. Blacks, Latinos, Hispanics, Asians, peace and anti-intervention activists, women, gays, and lesbians. And 2, after uniting activists around Jackson, we do broad outreach to our entire campus community to support Jackson.
Okay, PSN functioning?
We talked a long time. I think we came up with basically one resolution, would that be it, which is around fundraising. It's basically resolved that the Progressive Student Network sees fundraising as both a necessary political and organizational task, that local affiliates will be responsible for raising $5 per member per semester as affiliate dues. That will replace the present $5 individual memberships and $20 affiliate fees. And then 2, that affiliates are responsible for holding semesterly fundraising events to fund the operations of the PSN.
Okay, so I took all the resolutions and proposals that came up within the different groups. So tomorrow morning then we'll, have discussion, individual proposals, whatever, changes, whatever people want to struggle through, and work on that. Just a few things we need to clear up before we all go our separate ways. This evening, the plenary tomorrow, we'd like to start at 10. So if people, we still need to figure out just like a couple more details about the agenda of the plenary and stuff. So if people could show up like at 9, like we did this morning, to kind of resolve the next minute. And also if different campuses could make sure they got like their delegate stuff straightened out so that tomorrow morning we can also deal with the issue of sort of voting procedure and delegates and so on. Well, the steering committee or whatever, how the voting is. Or everybody votes? Okay, well,
If you're a member.
okay, well, I know there's been some concerns raised to me, so tomorrow morning, people can hammer it out. So that's for tomorrow morning. As far as like the rest of the evening goes, jump back. There's been a couple proposals as far as different caucuses go. So let me kind of lay those out and see what people think. One proposal, saying to have the gay and lesbian caucus as soon as this finishes, and then following that, to have a men's caucus and a women's caucus, same time, 2 separate caucuses. Another proposal, people are saying, can't deal with this anymore, to have just a gay and lesbian caucus this evening, or late afternoon, whatever it is. Yeah, and a third world caucus this evening. Tomorrow sometime, have a men's caucus and a women's caucus. People have things to say about this, so we can figure out. Yeah, I mean, it would have to be fit in sometime, I guess, before having the plenary tomorrow. Before? Yeah. Okay, so before the plenary.
Yeah, I would imagine that it should be before the plenary because the caucuses are another place where ideas, resolutions, and topics for discussion can be raised from. And if we do it after the final group meeting, it doesn't really make sense.
Okay, so
I don't know, I think that, I'm not sure if we're all going to get up at 8 in the morning for caucus or 9.
Well, I was just saying, whatever it is, it's before the
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would probably tend to have it sometime today. It was going to make it long, but I don't know if people are going to be committed to getting up and
10 to 11, do men's caucus, women's caucus at the same time, 11 on plenary.